with each of you. A process is currently being undertaken to identify, in accordance with the terms of reference, an independent private sector chairman, and this process is still ongoing. So felt it was really important that the LEP Scrutiny Committee takes place anyway. It forms a very important role in the governance and transparency of the activities of the LEP. So with that in mind, I did ask committee members in advance to seek nominations for chairman just for this meeting only. I've only received one nomination so far, which is that of County Councillor Cosima Townley. Can I just ask, first of all, are there any further nominations, please? No, okay, thank you. So on the basis that there aren't any, sorry, did somebody speak? No, sorry. Okay. So on that basis then, as there's no further nominations, it's proposed that County Councillor Cosima Townley is appointed as chairperson to this meeting. Are there any objections? Fantastic. Okay, so thank you very much. That appears to be agreed, and I will now pass the chair over to County Councillor Cosima Townley. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's very kind. Sorry, I think someone has a dog and isn't muted. Set mine off. So just if you see me grimacing, it's because they're copying off something here. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. This is the inaugural meeting of the LEP Lancashire Enterprise Partnership Scrutiny Group. We've got a little bit to get through. I'm wondering whether it would be we need to introduce all of ourselves at this present time. So if I could possibly start with the officers. Laura, could you kick off?
Sorry, I was just trying to find the unmute button. Sorry, Councillor Townley. Yes, hello everyone. I'm Laura Sales. I'm the Director of Corporate Services with the County Council, and also the Company Secretary of the LEP.
Okay, should I go next? It's Andy Milroy from Democratic Services, and I'm here supporting Laura.
And again, Brian Megan from Lancashire County Council Democratic Member Services.
Shall I go next? Sarah, good afternoon, Chief Executive of Lancashire LEP.
Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Lottie-Jones, Director of the Lancashire Skills and Employment Hub.
Anne-Marie?
Anne-Marie Parkerton, the LEP Investment Programme Manager and presenter today on Getting Building Fund.
Are we on to councillors now?
A couple more officers here, Chair. I'm Andy Walker, Head of Business Growth. My team delivers the Boost, Lancashire's Business Growth Hub, and I'll pass on to my colleague Pritam.
Hi, afternoon everyone. I'm Pritam Pal. I'm Boost Senior Project Officer. I'm responsible for day-to-day project management of Boost. I'm the bad cop in our project management team, which is the engine job and wealth creation in Lancashire. However, as part of our business support simplification role, I am the go-to person for our advanced manufacturing and manufacturing offers, which also includes 34 stakeholders in Lancashire, where I'm a lot more loved and not so unpopular. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any more officers, please? I think we're on to
excuse me, Chair. There's me. I'm Paul Evans. I'm the area lead for Lancashire and the Cities and Local Growth Unit. Sorry, my camera doesn't work with Zoom for some reason. I'm here as an observer on behalf of the government with a department responsible for local enterprise partnerships.
Thanks very much, Paul. And if we can start with Blackpool Council.
Thank you,
Hi,
Chair.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Have I missed someone? Someone went in there. Hey, Paula, do you want to continue, Paula?
Thank you, Chair. Paula Burdis, Councillor for Blackpool Council, also Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Blackburn with Darwin.
Hi, it's Councillor Zainab Brower. I'm here for Blackpool Darwin Council.
Thank you. Burnley Borough Council, please.
I'm Marcus Johnston from Burnley Borough Council. A number of familiar faces have popped up from my days as a county councillor as well, I see.
Chorley Borough Council.
Hello, I'm Graham Dunn from Chorley Council. I'm excuse me. I'm Cabinet Member for Housing, and also I spent a lot of time working for Lancashire County Council and finished as a director. And it's nice to see several old faces, or should I say more senior faces.
Fylde, please.
Hi, I'm Chris Dixon. I'm a councillor representing Fylde Council. I'm a councillor for Ansdell Ward. I also work for Mark Menzies MP for my day job, so we've come across the lot several times in that.
Thanks. And myself, Lancashire County Council, lead member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing. Lancaster City Council.
I am Dave Brooks. I'm a Cabinet Member at Lancaster City Council.
And Pendle Borough Council. Mohammed.
Hi everyone, I'm Mohammed Iqbal. I'm the leader at Pendle Borough Council.
Do we have a rep from Preston City Council?
No, we have apologies from Preston.
Thank you. Ribble Valley?
We also have apologies from Ribble Valley, whose councillor is Councillor Stuart Hurst.
Thank you. I saw that actually. Rosendale?
Adrian Lithgow. I'm a Cabinet Member from Rosendale.
Okay, South Ribble.
Afternoon, everyone. James Flannery, Middleford Councillor, Penwitham.
And West Lancashire.
Councillor David Evans. I'm a Cabinet Member for Planning.
Thank you. And Wyre Council.
Matthew Vincent. I'm the Vice Chair of ONS at Wyre Borough Council.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. I think we'll move on to declarations of interest. None. And 4, I'm going to hand over to Sarah, I think, to give the terms of reference. Just one thing, Sarah, I noticed there are a number of cabinet members here from various councils. I was under the impression that no executive cabinet members were meant to be members.
No,
Could we have some clarification on that?
Thank you for raising that, Chair. I think there has been some genuine confusion with regards to the terms of reference. So I just wonder if to date the committee would note the terms of reference, and then following this meeting, if we could continue with the meeting, that would be really appreciated with those who are representing today. And then following the meeting, I think what we need to do is go back and review the membership from some of the councils and make sure that we're compliant with the terms of reference by the time we meet again in September. Would that be okay, Chair?
I think everyone seems to be nodding in agreement. No one, if you do have anything to say, then please raise your hand. None done. Yes, we'll carry on. Thanks, Sarah. Can I hand it over to you now then for the terms of reference?
Yeah, so really the terms of reference just today, Chair, just to ask the committee to note those terms of reference, if that's okay, please.
Noted. Any member? None. Right, noted. Okay, so we'll move on to the overview of the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership. Everyone will have received the report, but I believe there is a presentation to be given by Michelle. No, sorry.
No, by myself, please.
By yourself, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Can I just check with you, are we doing our own slides or are you doing slides for us?
Yeah, if you've got them to hand, Sarah, if you could put them on screen, that would be great.
I will do that. Can everybody see that? Has that come up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm in the PDF, not the slide. So excuse me, I'll scroll as I'm talking to you. So this first item today really was not intended to be an item for scrutiny. It was really meant to just try and set some context around the local enterprise partnership, what it's about, what it does, and then hopefully be helpful in providing the context in which the 3 presentations that you are going to receive today from colleagues, you can understand where they fit into that picture of both the scope and nature of the activity that the LEP delivers. So just by way of background, I'm sure you all know, but local enterprise partnerships have been around for about 10 years now. This LEP will be 10 years old in this year. They were originally set up by government to be a partnership of the public and the private sector, and that's never changed. And over the period of the last 10 years, I've been entrusted with very significant public funds, predominantly capital funds, but some revenue funds as well, to support activities that drive growth across the economy across England. So, excuse me. We are a company, and as legal entities, we're still required to follow any relevant legislation and governance requirements. But we also have some requirements that are mandated by government that we must also comply with as well. And one of the main frameworks that we work within is called the National Growth Assurance Framework. And one of the requirements around that framework is that we have a local assurance framework that meets those requirements. So our local assurance framework sets out all the different activities of the LEP, all the different governance arrangements, how decisions are made, provides terms of reference for all of the committees of the LEP, and is our kind of our handbook, if you like, as to how we go about conducting our business on a daily basis. So let's generally work at a particular economic geography. In Lancashire, Lancashire LEP works across the whole of Lancashire and works with local places around developing economic strategy, setting strategic priorities, and we've been running programmes of capital investment to deliver some of those strategic priorities and some of the activities around business support and skills and training development. So just by way of background to the company is a company limited by guarantee. We have 3 company members who are Lancashire County Council, Blackburn Council and Blackburn with Darwen Council. And we have a board that's made up of both private sector LEP directors and public sector LEP directors. And government's requirement is that the proportionate relationship there is that the private sector LEP directors must be at least 2/3 of the board. And at the moment we have 17 LEP directors. So private sector members are in the box to the left, and then we have 5 public sector LEP directors: Phil Riley, Michael Green, Ivan Taylor, Stephen Atkinson and Alison Barnes. Then we're also allowed to have up to 5 co-opted board members. We don't have anybody officially at the moment as a co-opted board member, but very recently Tony Attard, who is the chair of Marketing Lancashire, is a co-opted board member, and we continue to work with Tony very closely, and Kate Shane, who is managing director of Merlin Entertainment. And then of course there's myself as chief executive, and then I have a team that works underneath me, and we work in partnership arrangements with local governments and other organisations in terms of delivering some of that activity. So within the structure of the company, there are a number of committees to the board, and I've listed those committees there. When the LEP was first set up, there was a performance committee, but it was agreed some time ago that would be replaced with the joint scrutiny committee, and hence the meeting of that committee today. So we've got the Growth Deal Management Board, which has oversight over growth deal funds, Business Support Management Board, oversight over the business support activity, the Scrutiny Committee, the Skills and Employment Advisory Panel, who've got oversight of the activity around skills and employment and training issues, Innovation Board, an Enterprise Zone Committee doing similar, and then there's an arrangement which many will be familiar with, the City Deal Executive and City Deal Stewardship Board. So those are the structures of the company, and we operate within a number of governance arrangements, governance requirements, which what I've done here is try to set them out as those that exist between the company and the members, which would be the Articles of Association and Accountable Body Agreement, because LEPs operate, one of the conditions of LEPs being entrusted with significant public funds is that there is an accountable body. Lancashire County Council is the accountable body for Lancashire LEP. We have a new partnership delivery framework, and of course company law, as I mentioned before. And then nationally, there are a number of requirements that we must comply with. So I've mentioned the National Assurance Framework. We also have an annual performance review, which is conducted by the local communities and local growth team, of which Paul is a member, who's on the call today. We also participate in a process of peer-to-peer review. So each LEP is matched with another LEP in the LEP network. And we engage in constructive challenge of each other's activities. Very helpful process because we learn from each other and share best practice and so on. We have some very formal programme monitoring responsibilities around those capital funds in particular. And then occasionally there may be deep dives that are requested by government. And there may be improvement plans as a consequence of that, or as a consequence of the annual performance review that are in operation. And then locally, I've mentioned the local assurance framework, the accountable body role. We must also have a Section 151 officer, and that officer for this LEP is Andrew Ridgewell, Chief Executive of the County Council. The normal audit functions that you would expect. Once a year as part of our annual performance review, both myself and the Chair of the LEP give statements to government assuring them of our compliance with those assurance frameworks, and likewise the Section 151 officer would do the same. We have an independent secretariat function, which is myself, so I report directly to the LEP board. And then we should also be holding an annual conference, which we haven't done for a couple of years, but we are planning to hold one at the end of June, all being well. So just a little bit about the role of scrutiny, which is an important component of those governance arrangements. So we're required through that National Growth Assurance Framework that we agree with the accountable body what the form of independent and external scrutiny should be, particularly local authority scrutiny of LEPs. And some time ago, it was agreed by the leaders that we would have a joint scrutiny committee, this committee, and that we would set that up, and this committee would meet at least twice a year and more if required. So this is an opportunity for you to scrutinise the work of the LEP on behalf of your area constituents. And really the focus is about being a critical friend to the LEP and giving feedback on our decision-making processes and our implementation processes, and helping us to improve the way in which we go about doing that, so that as we go forward, we do things more effectively and we make the positive changes that you have advised us on. So it's really about building kind of positive and constructive relationships between scrutiny, between you as local councillors and you as representatives of your constituents, between the LEP directors and the officers. And then as part of that function, as a scrutiny committee, it's within your rights, if you wish to gather evidence on issues that affect local people and bring those to scrutiny and make recommendations to the LEP. So ultimately, scrutiny is in local government. It's there to improve the lives of local people by continuously improving the public services that we provide. So very, very quickly, just a quick overview on delivery. So we do a number of different things. So I mentioned we lead on setting economic strategy for the county. There's a number of elements of strategy that are in play at the moment. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the strategic framework for a couple of minutes, just to share with you what that's all about. I think many of you will have heard of the local industrial strategy. This was a strategy that government required LEPs to produce, which really addressed the underlying structural challenges of productivity with an aim of improving and working to overcome the barriers to growth and to productivity. We've recently commissioned an internationalisation strategy, the bedrock of which is export and inward investment, but we're looking at all elements of globalisation, so transport connectivity, connectivity through communities, foreign students, connection through research and innovation and so on, with a view to building internationally competitive sectors and leveraging more growth as a consequence of building those international relationships. We're also producing sector plans now. I'll talk for 2 minutes on that on the next slides. We have an innovation strategy that's approved and it's in implementation at the moment. I think about 70% of that strategy is now being commissioned and implemented. Likewise, a cultural strategy. And then, of course, you will all know about the Greater Lancashire Plan. So we're working as part of the client group with local government partners on the independent economic review and making sure that all of that strategic activity is wholly aligned with the work of the independent economic review. So there's a strategy element to what we do. There's a programme management element. So 3 major capital funds we've been directly managing for the last few years. The Growth Deal Fund, the Getting Building Fund and the Growing Places Fund. We also in delivery work with partners around delivering the Boost Growth Hub service, the Skills and Employment Hub, City Deal, Enterprise Zones and the Innovation Programme, to name but a few. And then also we would engage in regional collaboration where it makes sense to do that. So MP11, which is the group that is made up of the the Metro Mayors and the chairs of the local enterprise partnerships, the LEP network across the country. There's 38 LEPs across the country. And then a number of initiatives, I've just named one there, Net Zero Northwest, but initiatives that spread beyond the geographical boundaries of Lancashire, but by partnering, we're able to achieve things that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So I think if you think about them in those broad categories, you've probably got the scope of some of the things that the LEP does. So shared that with you very quickly just to explain which items we brought to scrutiny today. And there are 3 different items, as it were. What I wanted to do is just give you a flavour of some of those different areas. But of course, all of this is open to scrutiny. And what would be really helpful at the end of this first scrutiny meeting is to have your feedback on where you would like to go in this process. So, you know, in the next scrutiny committee, perhaps you want to have more breadth and cover more of these areas, or maybe there's a particular area where you want to do a deep dive in particular. So what I've picked today is three different elements. So one's from the programme management box there, and we're going to talk about the process by which the allocations of capital funds were made for the Getting Building Fund. So that was the fund that the government announced in July of last year, and Lancashire secured £34 million. So Anne-Marie is going to speak to you about that shortly. Another area under strategy development, we're going to bring the Skills and Employment framework refresh, a piece of work that's just recently been consulted on and refreshed for a further 12 months. And Michelle Lawty-Jones, Director of Skills Hub, is going to talk to you about that. And then under partnership delivery, Andy Walker is here today to talk to you about their response to COVID. So over and above the great things that the Growth Hub are doing every day, they've been super busy over the last few months delivering a number of additional initiatives and trying to support businesses in every way that they can. So I said I'd just spend a few minutes just talking about the strategic economic framework, because there's a lot of activity in this space. So this will be an area where perhaps going forward you may want to do a little bit more of a deep dive. Going back probably just over a year, the LEP board developed this new strategic economic framework. And what it is a framework that seeks to align and integrate lots of different elements of economic development activity. So within there will be elements focused on data and intelligence and analysis, economic forecasting, those kind of things. A lot of strategy development, so strategic analysis based on that evidence-based picture that we're building up, developing strategies on a number of different fronts that work together and support economic growth. It's a framework which holds both public and private sector investment. So as I'm sure you're aware, any public funds that we have the opportunity to deploy, do it in such a way that we can leverage as much private sector investment as possible. So there's programme work in there. It may be major programmes like Growth Deal or very specific projects. We think about resources in that capacity, what we need within the LEP, what we need across the partnership, and how we make sure that we get the best use out of the team that we've got, and we're sharing the capability and capacity within our teams. Then an element of monitoring and evaluation to make sure that we're achieving the strategic impact that was intended, and all of our sort of partnership working is framed in that context. So this is the strategic framework, and central to the framework are what we're calling these pillars of growth. So 6 groupings of industry sectors. And I mentioned before that we're developing sector plans for each of these sectors. So we're developing the local industrial strategy at the moment, which was very prescriptive around drivers of productivity, but we're giving equal focus to job creation and competitive growth at the same time as productivity. I'll talk to those just in a moment. But underneath that, we have a number of key enablers with a very specific focus on some of which you will hear a little bit about today. So education and skills, for example, infrastructure, finance, inward investment, health and well-being, and stakeholder engagement. So on that picture, I know it's a very busy chart, but in effect, what's in green is already existing, and it's work that's either being developed or has been developed and is in implementation. And then what's in brown is new, and we've sort of wrapped that up and called that phase 1 delivery of the strategic framework. So there's a piece of work going on for each of those different elements. They may be of interest to you to scrutinise going forward. And that work has largely been commissioned now, and a large part of this coming financial year will be focused on getting that developed and into delivery. Just tell you a little bit about the pillars of growth, because we formed sector groups of business leaders for each of those 6 industry sectors that were on the previous slide. And those groups were formed, we started the formation of them probably going back to May, June of last year, at which time we were dealing with the first lockdown and the impacts of COVID. So as those groups formed, initially their kind of concentration of effort was around the impact of COVID on as an industry sector and what the appropriate response to COVID should be. But the long-term aim is for them to develop sector plans to create internationally competitive sectors, if international competitiveness is the most important thing. And within those sector plans, they will be pointing to some of those enablers I mentioned before, and making sure that their plans encompass and talk to those enablers in a way that helps them to remove the barriers to growth and to grow more strongly and be more resilient as sectors. So you would expect in a sector plan, therefore, to see elements that relate to the industry sector around skills and training, around innovation, business support, inward investment, trade, enterprise environment, finance for business, a whole host of different things. So each one is going to be different because different sectors have different needs, but that's the goal that we're working towards. And then we'll publish those sector plans, and it will continue to be an iterative process. So as soon as we've got confidence, we can say something with certainty about the right actions and interventions to take. Whilst we implement them, the sector groups will continue to meet in an oversight function, but also to steer the direction and development of the work around supporting their sectors. And all of that, as I mentioned before, we're wrapping up into the industrial strategy. So we're looking at making job creation, job growth, sustainability as important as productivity. So I mentioned very briefly that when the sector groups first met, they were focused very much on the response to COVID. And as you can imagine, different sectors have had a very different response to the impacts of COVID. So in Lancashire, we've had some sectors that are very severely challenged and still in that phase at the moment. So for example, hospitality and tourism. But at the same time, we've also had sectors that have been least impacted, nuclear, for example, where very few staff furloughed, no loss of business, maybe some hit on revenue streams this year, but by and large, unaffected by comparison to other sectors, and then everything in between. So what the sector groups were doing over the last few months is defining what stage they're at in their sector. Are they in survival mode? Are they stabilising? Are they in recovery? Are they back to returning to growth? And does that return to growth look different now to the trajectory that they were on pre-COVID? And as part of that, they've been identifying what good looks like, given that they're in survival mode or in the stabilisation mode, or whichever mode they're in. So they've been very pragmatic about what good would be in the context of a very, very challenging environment. And they set out the challenges and opportunities that COVID has presented. And to be fair, actually, for many sectors, there was a really good balance between the two in terms of challenges and opportunities. And what would we need to do to either address those challenges or to meet those opportunities? So they may have thought about some of the things on the left-hand side in terms of unpacking the issues. So particularly in the early days of COVID, when one of their key concerns was around cash in the business, around not losing customers. Excuse me 1 second, somebody's mowing the lawn outside. I'm just going to close the window. Forgive me 1 second. I hope that's better. Apologies for that. So they're all in different stages now. Some are still fighting for survival. Others are definitely are stable or in recovery. Many sectors are thinking about the future now, particularly now they've got a roadmap out of COVID. So this is just to share with you who's chairing the sector groups. So under manufacturing, we have a LEP director, Annette Weeks, who's the managing director of a group of engineering businesses called PDS CNC Engineering. We've also formed, as a task force very early on in this process, an aerospace task force, because aerospace was another sector that was very impacted very early on. And Claire Whelan now chairs the aerospace task force. And I'll just talk a little bit more about what the output of that group has been in a moment. Under digital, we have Cam Cotia. Cam is also a LEP director, new LEP director. He's Chief Executive of Time to Technologies and Managing Director of eBusiness. He's also the Chair and Founder of Star Academy. So very passionate about the digital sector, very passionate about skills and training and young people. Under energy and low carbon technologies, we actually have 2 chairs there. We've got 2 co-chairing. So Mick Gornall, who's the MD of Cavendish Nuclear, and Miranda Barker, both LEP directors. Miranda, some of you will know, is the Chief Executive of East Lancashire Chambers, but she's also an environmentalist by background, so she has a lot of domain knowledge and experience in this sector. For food and agriculture, it's David Hall, Regional Director of the National Farmers Union. For the health sector group, it's St John Crean. He's the Pro Vice Chancellor for Clinical at UCLan. And then when we set up the Tourism Culture and Place group, Kate Shane was the chair of the group, but Kate's taken a step back because, as you can imagine, she's been dealing with some quite serious business critical issues. So I've been the chair in the interim, but we're looking for a new chair at the moment. And then down the right-hand side are some of the kind of the current burning issues of those groups that they're considering. So I mentioned the Aerospace Task Force. This is the front cover. You'll find this on the website, on the LEP's website. And this is just an example of the output of some of these groups. So when this group formed early on, the impact through the loss of civil aerospace and aviation was very, very significant for them. Major concern, after the loss of orders was the loss of employment, and how did they protect that loss of employment. Defence Aerospace doing reasonably well. They were able to absorb some of those losses in employment to their benefit. Still a very worrying number of redundancies, loss of apprenticeships. But some of those businesses have already been very agile and flexible in terms of diversification, some of them into the PPE market to continue to survive as businesses. So if you get a chance to take a look at this, what you'll find is that the work of that group came together a number of times, very open about the impact in their business. They shared a lot of quantitative data with us so we could understand the impact on the order book, the impact on employment. And in those early days, worked with 3 potential scenarios, not knowing how the pandemic was going to play out and impact the industry. So they had an optimistic scenario, middle of the road, a pessimistic scenario, and they came up with 15 interventions to respond to those scenarios. And the County Council have been great in terms of putting forward the funding for 3 of those initiatives, and we're working to make sure that we can try and make sure that all the interventions that they've identified as being critical to recovery are put in place. So I just give that to you by way of example, and it's our hope and intention every couple of months to be producing a new sector report, and they might be reports that you might be interested in scrutinising. So final slide, I promise. Nothing there I think that would surprise you in terms of responding to the big challenges. COVID, obviously, the impact of COVID, the need to recover and return back to growth. Brexit needs no explanation. Climate change, at the forefront of everything that we're doing. Closing the productivity gap, devolution, and then I'll just mention the LEP review very quickly. It might be one that you've not heard about, but when the Chancellor made the budget announcement, it was also announced that there would be a review of LEPs. So for the last 10 years, LEPs have been conduits of significant capital funds. Those capital funds will not be flowing through LEPs going forward. So there is to be a review, the terms of reference of which will probably be published before heard of that. That's what they're working towards at the moment. They will conduct the review with the LEP network over the next couple of months, and hopefully a fresh statement will come out before the summer recess that just redefines the role and responsibility of the LEP. So the next time we meet, I'll be able to give you an update on that review process and what it means for us going forward. So I hope that was helpful. I'll pause to take questions and comments, but as I said, just intended really just to give you some background and context in which hopefully you will now be able to kind of place some of the next agenda items.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a really comprehensive, if quick, rush through. I'm sure there are questions. I'm going into the participants list. If you have a question, if you could go into the little person-shaped thing at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand. I know I've got a question, but I'll just wait for everyone else to. Can I kick off then, Sarah? I note that, and I fully recognise the importance of the digital and other technologies in manufacturing in Lancashire. I'm slightly concerned about 2 things. There doesn't seem to be any mention of fisheries along with the agri policy, and I was also wondering where the initiatives were being placed within either heritage or the practical businesses within the countryside. There seems to be and rightly so, because most people do work from an office and technologically and digitally, but there is also a not insignificant number of rural, on your hands, outdoor jobs, and I've always felt that these have never been given any sort of prominence, even though they are actually of great importance in the landscape.
Thank you. Good question. So fisheries fits within the food and agriculture group. So in these sector groups, what we try to do is build up representation from all of the subsectors, from all geographies across Lancashire, so from different places and for different sizes of enterprises. So from micro businesses up to the large corporates, that's within the structure of the sector. As you can imagine, there's crossover between these sectors, and the sector leads are working more and more closely with each other in terms of identifying those crossovers and making sure that nothing kind of falls between the cracks. So on the countryside or rural businesses, it tends to be considered in 2 places. So it tends to be covered again under food and agriculture, because so much of the supply chain in that space are rural based businesses. So it's often picked up there. It's also picked up under the tourism, culture and place sector group as well. Having said all of that, it has been mentioned to me more than once that possibly one of the things LEP should think about is the production of a coastal and a rural strategy. So I think as the work of those sector groups emerges, it would be great to share it with you, and particularly the significance of those rural-based businesses and how they're being supported through the pandemic and for future growth. If we feel that perhaps we're not doing enough there, it would be great for you to challenge us on that when we bring that back to you in terms of the nature and scope of that activity. And we'll have a look with you about whether we should be doing more than is currently already proposed.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, no, that'd be great. I see that Graham Dunn has raised his hand.
Thank you. Sarah, I wondered what structures, you could say something about the structures you have for regional cooperation and getting on with Greater Manchester. A number of authorities, for example, Chorley, where I'm from, is immediately adjacent to Bolton. And there are considerable difficulties in, shall we say, working together with them. And Greater Manchester shows no inclination to play across boundaries. I wondered about your experience in doing this and what structures are there that we might look into.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say my experience has been really positive. And I personally have worked in Greater Manchester for a number of years and in the Liverpool City region and across kind of the whole of the Northwest. I was 6.5 years at the Regional Development Agency before it closed. So I have a number of contacts and relationships which make things easier. But in terms of the formal infrastructure, you've got the LEP network that I mentioned before. So in the Northwest, Cheshire, Warrington, Greater Manchester, Liverpool City region and Cumbria, along with ourselves. And there are regular monthly meetings between the chairs of the LEP network and the chief execs. And there's a number of things that we work on together. And likewise, that would be true of NP11. So regular meetings of the chairs and chief execs. And then underneath there are sub boards. So for example, there's an innovation board of NP11. So that's the kind of the more formal structures, if you like. But my experience of engaging with those structures is that they're very well engaged, they're very well done, and they're very willing to deal with some of these issues. Now, on the issue that you particularly raised, Councillor Dunn, about Chorley and the connectivity with Greater Manchester, I think one of the big opportunities of the Independent Economic Review and some of the deep dives of the Independent Economic Review is actually looking at some of those smaller geographies and how they interact with neighbouring places. So maybe for Chorley it's more Greater Manchester, for other places north of the county, you know, there's more affiliation with South Cumbria. So I think that's kind of a great opportunity. That works very active at the moment. Those deep dives are very active. They will also be looking, one of the deep dives, looking at the infrastructure and infrastructure connectivity, not only within Lancashire, but to these kind of key economic functional areas where people are moving in and out of. So I think there's kind of a present opportunity to address those issues, and I'll make sure that we pick that up in that deep dive process of the economic review.
Thanks, Sarah. Have you got anything else to say, Graham?
No, I'm happy about that, particularly the last point, because infrastructure is a thing of key importance for us. For example, I live in a village on the south of Chorley, and 90% of the people go south to Manchester and Salford and so on, and only 10% actually go north to Preston. So in infrastructure, the same applies to West Lancashire, for example. Infrastructure there is very important.
Yeah, I mean, you asked about the connectivity with work with other regions, but the Economic Development Officers Group of the local authorities, you know, are very active in the space, building that pipeline around infrastructure at the same time. So there's lots of work going on in making sure that all of local needs are encompassed and addressed within that pipeline. I think it's adding up to something like over £2 billion worth of investments at the moment. It's very, very significant in terms of the opportunity for Lancashire.
Thank you. Is that okay, Graham? Okay, Sarah, I think I can't see any other hands up, so perhaps we can move on. And I think you're taking the next item as well, aren't you?
No, I think it's a colleague next.
I think it's me, Sarah.
Yes, sorry, Anne-Marie. So I was just moving up the slides. Yes.
Sorry, yes, sorry, Anne-Marie. Okay, floor's all yours.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll just share my presentation with you all. Can everyone see that?
Oh.
I can't see
no,
anything.
not yet.
No? I knew it wasn't going to be so straightforward. I'll try again.
There. Yeah, it's coming through now, Anne-Marie. Just a
Coming
second.
through.
I'll
Yeah,
say if you,
fine.
yeah, if you just click start your slideshow from the top, you just click on slideshow along the top bar. Just over there, yeah. Click on there. And then from the beginning, that should go full screen.
Thank you, Andy. I did try. Somebody told me the trick of F5, but clearly it didn't work today.
You got there.
Hopefully everyone can see that now. So thank you very much for receiving this presentation. It's going to be quite dry because it's process driven, but what we need to remember is it's very important because it outlines a process which is essential to delivering accountability and transparency in terms of the utilisation of public funds. Just a quick background for me, very, very quick, just so you understand who's managing the programme. So my first 9 years of my career was spent in the RAF. So you're embedded, what's entrenched in you is continuous improvement and efficiencies. So that is at the heart of our learning. Following that last 20 years, I've spent, and you'll be able to work out my age from this, I've spent working across the public and private sector, delivering projects myself as a project manager. So they might be skills, they might be employment, there might be capital infrastructure projects, or ones around business and housing. From project management, for which I loved, went on to programme management. So this is what I tend to do now. The programme that I deliver alongside the Getting Building Fund in the LEP it was a growth deal programme. So that was 320 million that we were allocating to projects with a combined value of about 700 million. The processes that you're going to hear today about the Getting Building Fund are largely based on the Getting growth deal processes, but enhanced. As we say, we've got to improve as we go along, so we can always learn lessons in terms of how we deliver these schemes. As Sarah mentioned before, the growth deal programme has been undertaken deep dives by government, and it's scrutinised in terms of our annual performance review, where it received a ranking of good, which is the highest that you can actually get for delivery. So that just show you a little bit about the programme management. Also, you don't really need to know, but qualified Prince 2 practitioner and also DTR appraisal qualified as well in terms of those processes needing to assure business case assurance. So moving on from me, we'll get on with the presentation, but I'm glad that everyone can see. So we're here today to discuss the Getting Building Fund allocation process, and I'll just take you through the slides. The slides are very detailed, they do follow the full process, so I'll just be reading from them really. So the Getting Building Fund, £900 million government programme to deliver skills, jobs and infrastructure across the country. It's investment targeted, facing the biggest economic challenges as a result of the pandemic. It is supporting the delivery of shovel-ready infrastructure projects to boost the economy and fuel local recovery and jobs even. Lancashire secured 34.1 million in August last year, and it's been allocated to 10 projects, total value of 111 million, including match funding. Very important, the next point, the allocations to the projects are made against strict criteria set by government. So they must meet that criteria in order to receive an allocation. Projects are required to defray their full spend by the 31st of March next year, so it's a condensed programme, and that responds to the immediate response to the pandemic. In accordance with the LEP assurance framework, all 10 projects have produced a Green Book business case, which has been independently appraised and received LEP board funding approval. Contracting on all schemes is expected to complete by the end of this month. By the end of 2025, the programme is expected to bring 1,500 jobs, 1,000 housing and 40,000 commercial floor space. They're just the core outputs. There are additional outputs in terms of carbon outputs, housing. I've got housing down there. Many other core outputs, skills, etc. So, getting into the process now. So, on the 10th of June, the Secretary of State wrote to all Mayor combined authorities, LEP chairs, and local authority leaders, authority chief execs, requesting information on existing government-funded projects, which could be accelerated using additional government funds to stimulate demand and the economy over the next 18 months. It was also advised that they would consider new, exceptional, additional shovel-ready projects, which could be delivered in 18 months also. The funding criteria, which I referred to earlier, said that they had to be delivered by March 22, and they had to address certain objectives and priorities as listed on that slide. So the two main objectives were delivering economic growth and jobs and supporting green recovery. There are also, and I apologise for your pack because I've included 6 priority areas in your pack, but there are 5. I duplicated one. So it's about town and city modernisation, investment in physical connectivity, investment in innovation ecosystem, improvements to human capital, including business support, and improving digital connectivity. Process. So it was requested that LEPs and MCAs complete a template which was provided by government containing projects from across Lancashire which met that criteria. This call was made with no appreciation of what level of funds we may become available, or if funds would even become available at all. The template was very high level and with limited information, and they gave us 1 week to complete this template and return it to them. So during the period that following week, 10th to 15th of June, we recirculated the request from the Secretary of State to organisations with a deadline to return the template to the LEP by the 16th to 17th of June. The correspondence that we sent out clearly identified that they must only provide projects which met the criteria for the call. A reminder was sent out just to make sure no organisations missed that deadline. And on the 17th, 27 organisations from across Lancashire submitted a total of 72 projects with a combined ask of 683 million. So it just shows that breadth of projects from across Lancashire, even though some of them weren't deliverable within that timescales in the end, but it's a good demonstration. On the 17th to 18th, LEP officers, including myself, we appraised each project submission, seeking clarifications where required from organisations and collating a master template of the 72 projects. Prioritisation. So government requested that LEP prioritise the projects which could meet the delivery criteria and objectives, again without any appreciation for the level of funds that would be allocated to Lancashire. LEP officers prioritised 16 of the 72 projects against the criteria below, in consideration of clarifications and information provided by the applicant. So the criteria being deliverable by March 22, so this is 18 months, deliverable against the objective 1 and 2 that we discussed earlier, against the priority interest areas, and provide value for money in accordance with our assurance framework. In terms of some of the reasons why projects weren't prioritised, it was a combination of projects either not meeting the objectives, so they had to tick a box to say whether or not they met the objectives, and we obviously clarified this, or they were unable to demonstrate they were deliverable by March 22. So in terms of deliverability, this is where most projects fell out of the prioritised list. So the projects are too large and complex, lengthy lead-in times and funding tails, gaps in delivery information which, following clarification, identified they weren't shovel ready, very complex delivery arrangements, multiple partners, excessive planning that would be required, state aid and security matters which couldn't be resolved in the time frame, match funding not secured and would be able to be secured within the time frame. Significant risks around planning, CPO, land acquisition. When you're used to appraising this type of projects, you know straight away how long these processes would take. And lastly, they didn't offer value for money as defined in the assurance framework. But what was interesting and not surprising actually is a number of organisations did advise that they just wanted to submit all the projects they had in their portfolio, in the awareness that most wouldn't meet the call, but they wanted them there and they wanted them cited and they wanted them visible, which is absolutely acceptable. On the 18th of June, the LEP Chief Executive Officer, Sarah, gained approval from the LEP Board and Section 151 to submit the combined template, which contained the 72 projects, but also, as requested by government, prioritised 16 with a combined ask of 62 million. They were identified in the template as prioritised, having met the core criteria. On the 2nd of July, and apologies, I know there's a lot of dates and process, but it's just taking you through the process. The Secretary of State notified that we'd received 34.1 million had been allocated to Lancashire. Government advised a further template would need to be completed, which should only contain the prioritised projects which could fully demonstrate deliverability and outputs within the scope of the allocation for Lancashire. So really drilling down now. The projects which were not prioritised previously were all informed that they haven't been successful, but they would remain in the LEP pipeline in anticipation for future funding opportunities suited to their project. Between the 2nd and 10th of July, noting that the deadline was the 17th, we received the second template from government. So we'd already had some conversations with the organisations that were prioritised anyway to say this template was going to be on the way. So we'd arranged detailed assurance meetings with the organisations of the 16 projects to understand the projects in greater detail, to ask those questions: deliverability, strategic fit, risks. The 16 projects, which equated to the 62 million, were advised based on the current findings whether or not they were in and out of scope of the 34.1 million funding envelope. This is so that they were able to understand what resources they were willing to allocate to this process. It was advised that the ranking may well change following the meetings with them that followed and subsequent information that was provided. Following the assurance meetings, organisations were required to provide project milestones, outputs, expenditure profile, state aid, security, match funding, risk identification, and other project-specific information, i.e. planning statements, as these elements were required to ensure the core criteria could be met. We have to remember these were supposed to be shovel ready, ready to go, and as such they should have all this information in place in order to do that. The outcome of the discussions as we drilled down against the criteria resulted in a change to the ranking for some of the 16 projects. Organisations were made aware of the next steps should they be successful in receiving an allocation. That included the business case process, etc., just so they could gear up resources. On the 8th of July, government provided the further template with a deadline. We were given slightly longer than a week. I think we were given 11 days of this one to return the template to government. On the 17th of July, following the completion of the assurance undertaken that we've discussed previously, and in consultation with the LEP Board and government, 10 projects were selected from the 16, equating to the 34.1 million allocation as requested by government. The LEP Board and the Section 151 officer approved the template, which was then submitted to government. On the 4th of August, the formal announcement from government which detailed which projects had received the funding was received, and this reflected the submitted template. Projects which received the allocation were contacted immediately to progress the next steps, which included the production of the 5-case Green Book business case, the independent assurance of that business case, to seek LEP Board funding approval and complete contracting in the form of a grant funding agreement. The steps that I've just referred to follow those undertaken, as I said previously, in the Growth Deal programme, which provide a consistent and transparent approach, compliant with our local and national assurance frameworks, and verified via the deep dives and APRs by government. The only exception, due to timescales of the programme, was presentation of the projects directly to the LEP board, as opposed to seeking approval from a LEP subcommittee. For example, the Growth Deal Management Board was the subcommittee of the LEP. They would consider the projects in advance of the LEP board for that particular programme. So upon receipt of the independent assurance report respect to each of the business case, 2 special meetings of the LEP board were held in September and October last year to seek the funding approvals for the 10 projects. In addition to receipt of the detailed approval report for each project, members were also provided with a presentation of each project from the applicant organisation. These presentations were absolutely critical to bringing these projects to life for members, and also in receipt of the detailed assurance reports. All 10 projects followed the same consistent, independent, transparent approach. So in terms of the current status of the projects, so 10 projects have received funding approval from the board. It's actually 2 projects have completed contracting, with the 9 remaining to be completed by the end of March. So we're busily working on those over the next few days. 6 projects have commenced physical works, and no issues are reported on schemes in terms of the delivery at this stage. Because contracting hasn't completed, I am in regular communication almost daily with each of the projects. So in terms of risk, the Getting Building Fund feeds into the LEP's operational risk register, which is presented to the LEP board at each meeting. So as a minimum, the risks are reviewed on a quarterly basis by the LEP programme manager, myself, or more frequently if required. In addition, each project also maintains a risk register of their own. This is a key requirement of the business case, and also an ongoing requirement in terms of our quarterly reporting and claiming. So I've listed, you can see there, the current risks. I won't go through them. And then the next 2 slides within your pack detail the projects that have received the funding. So Abingdon Street Market, I won't go through what most of them pretty much speak for themselves. So refurbishment of that market. Elker Lane in Chorley, so it's new commercial floor space. Burnley Pioneer retail space. Hill House International Business Park, which is infrastructure and development works. Hill House Extension Shopping Centre. The Lancashire Centre for Alternative Technologies at Red Cat. Low Carbon Demonstrator at Samlesbury Enterprise Zone. Project Neptune at Wyre. The M55 St Anne's Link Road scheme in Fylde, and Tatton Development in Chorley. Thank you for bearing with me on the process. Appreciate, as I said before, it is dry, but these are exciting projects, and be assured the next 2 presentations, much more on the delivery side, will be a lot more entertaining than mine. Any questions and comments, be gratefully received.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. I am going through the list of I see one name, Chris Dixon, sorry. Chris Dixon.
Yeah, just out of interest, did you say 2 have been, has the M55, has that been agreed today and signed off, just out of interest?
Not quite yet, but I do expect it to be done either tonight or tomorrow morning.
Wonderful, thank you.
I know that's close to a great many people's hearts, that one. Thanks very much. There's a lot in these presentations, and I'm aware that we are quite constrained on time. So if people don't have any immediate questions, we'll move on to...
Cosmo, can I just say one thing? I did do the raise hand thing.
Sorry, I
just for information, the Burnley project, the Real Cinema project, goes before the planning committee tomorrow.
Good.
With a recommendation to approve.
And I'm sure they will follow the officer's recommendation.
I'm not at liberty to speculate.
Right, okay, so if we could move on to item 7, and Michelle, I think you're presenting this one, aren't you?
I am indeed, yeah, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen, and hopefully, oh no, that's not worked, has it? That's the wrong screen, bear with me. There we go. No. Oh, the joys of Zoom, eh? This should work. It should go straight to screen two, but for some reason.
It did come on then, Michelle.
Did it?
Just to let you know, yeah.
Is that it? Can you see
Yes, yeah, it's on screen.
It's having multiple screens, isn't it? It's confusing. So, yeah, thank you for the slot today. So, come to talk to you about the Lancashire Skills and Employment Strategic Framework. So, my name's Michelle Lawty-Jones, and I head up the Lancashire Skills and Employment Hub. So, we'll give you a bit of background information first. So as Sarah referenced, we have a committee infrastructure that forms part of the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership, and part of that is the Skills and Employment Board, which was set up shortly after the formation of the LEP. To complement that, the Skills and Employment Hub was established in 2015 to provide some capacity to the board. So at that time, we didn't have a skills strategy in place Lancashire-wide. So one of the key things to do was actually to look at what are our key priorities in relation to skills and employment, what are the key issues we were looking to address. So when I joined back in 2015, how time flies, we commissioned an evidence base. So that included a raft of local labour market intelligence, looking at population data, employment, unemployment, attainment levels, key businesses, sectors, employment forecasts for the future by occupation, level of qualification, and so on. And that was analysed across 6 travel to work areas across Lancashire. And we also complemented that with a number of sector studies linked to the LEP priority sectors at the time, which again looked at data, but also had a qualitative element where we went out and about talking to businesses about what their skills and employment requirements were. We also did a study around the City Deal as well back then, looking at what the skills and employment implications were from the City Deal as well, both in relation to construction, but also in relation to future employment opportunities resulting from that investment. So a huge amount of evidence was pulled together, and we developed the first framework. We also undertook consultation, so we did some quite large events face-to-face back in the day with employers, providers and stakeholders, including the local authorities. So back in February 2016, we published our first iteration of the Lancashire Skills and Employment Strategic Framework, and it was published for the period of 2016 to 20. It covers 4 key themes, which we've maintained in the refresh of the framework. So the first focus on the future workforce, so that's developing our future pipeline of talent. So a big focus on careers provision for young people, technical education pathways, investment in the college and provider university infrastructure through growth deal, making sure facilities and technologies fit for purpose. Our second theme, the skilled and productive workforce, is engaging directly with the business community, engagement in things like apprenticeships, reskilling and retraining the workforce, and also looking at leadership and management capacity. The inclusive workforce, which is very much about that kind of growth angle, and recognising the need to engage our Lancashire residents in all these employment opportunities and improving the economic prosperity of our people. So programmes to move unemployed inactive into work, digital inclusion, within there is embedding social value as well into our capital programmes and alignment with our skills and employment framework, and finally taking an informed approach to what we do. So that's kind of looking at that evidence base and making sure we're in tune with employer needs and demands. So the Lancashire Skills and Employment Board, just to give you a flavour of how it's made up. So the membership, there's a click on there if you want to look at the people who are involved, but it includes the universities, includes the colleges, independent training providers, third sector, the schools. We have a number of industry representatives as well, which reflect the growth pillars that Sarah referenced earlier, and also includes a representative from the Lancashire leaders, So we have our lead member for skills and employment, which is Mark Townsend, and Dean Langton as Chief Executive at Pendle. So they're part of the board and have been for a number of years. The board evolved and was renamed to the Lancashire Skills and Employment Advisory Panel in 2018, which was when the DFE recognised the good work going on across the country through a number of skills and employment boards in terms of identifying priorities, which are helpful for them in terms of developing policy around skills and employment and their strategies, and also looking at commissioning. So in 2018, just prior to that, we got involved in the modelling of the SAPs across the country. We were one of 6 areas recognising the good work of the Skills and Employment Board in Lancashire. So there's now 36 skills advisory panels across the country, SAPs as they call them, linked to the LEPs and to mayoral combined authorities where they exist. So refresh for 2021. So just before I come on to that, just to note that there's been a lot of activity over the last 4 years in terms of skills and employment, very much working with partners. So the framework is there to help direct the energy of all the partners that we work with, as well as influence government policy and help direct the investments that we make locally through things like the Growth Deal programme, European social funds, and so on. So a number of things to highlight. We now have an open source labour market intelligence toolkit, which our partners use and is appreciated. So that supports things like curriculum planning, supports the direction of investments, as I say, priorities for projects such as those under the European social funds, and careers information, advice and guidance, both for young people and for adults. We have an award-winning careers hub and enterprise advisor network, which was established first off in 2016 and has evolved over the past 4 years to gain full coverage across the whole of Lancashire. So that now involves 155 secondary schools, including our SEN schools, all of them, and our pupil referral units, all of them, and our colleges. And they are now matched to business volunteers. So we've got about 170 business leaders volunteering to give their time to help those establishments develop inspirational careers programmes. And that includes employer encounters and experiences. So we've got oodles of businesses across Lancashire, virtually at the moment, previously physically, going in and out of schools, providing insights into different careers, sectors, opportunities. And that's mapped again against our kind of growth pillars in terms of where the needs are and what we know from our labour market intelligence in terms of future employment forecasts. We launched the first digital skills partnership in the country back in April 2018. That's a partnership with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS. And that has resulted in some fabulous activity with some corporates, as well as driving activity locally. So just a few highlights. For example, we've had over 750 SMEs go through the Google Garage programme. A new programme was launched at the beginning of March as well, specifically for the third sector and charities, recognising that they need support around digital skills, particularly around, with the pandemic accelerating the need for digital. We've had 2,000 learners go through the Freeformers programme, which is sponsored by Facebook, around digital skills. We've also, with DCMS and Greater Manchester Combined Authority, so some good collaborative work across the borders. We have been testing boot camp provision, which is aimed at unemployed people to move them into higher value digital roles, recognising the skill shortages that we've got in Lancashire and Greater Manchester. So from cyber to cloud engineering to digital marketing, additive manufacturing, a whole raft of different boot camps which have been developed in collaboration with business. So we've had 900 residents currently engaged in those boot camps, and it's resulted in kind of influencing national policy around the National Skills Fund. So the programme is now being rolled out nationally. We've also just run a Teen Tech Festival with Maggie Philbin. I'm sure you'll all remember Maggie Philbin from Tomorrow's World, who's very engaged in inspiring young people about digital skills and technology of the future. So getting involved in designing the city of tomorrow. So some really exciting stuff going on there. We've invested around 30 million through Skills Capital, so working with Anne-Marie, and that's supporting projects in the colleges and the universities to develop facilities, either investing in technology and equipment or enabling new builds. So from robotics at Nelson and Colne College through to the tech centre at the Tech Hub at Edge Hill University, through to the Blackpool Energy HQ on the Enterprise Zone. So a wide range of investments. Through European social funds, we've invested over 98 million into projects since the beginning of the programme, joining the dots on provision and working with providers to make sure we move individuals into sustainable employment outcomes. So just a few stats from that: we've supported over 5,600 young people at risk of or not in employment, education, training, the NEET young people, to support them back into learning or work. We've supported over 18,000 unemployed and inactive individuals, and we've supported over 4,000 businesses to upskill over 11,400 employees. So quite a big programme and a lot of activity, and obviously we're working hard to influence the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which will be you know, the next programme. We've also launched the Lancashire Skills Pledge, which engages employers into working with education in a simplified way. So people can pledge to support careers provision in schools, they can pledge to provide industry placements, take on apprentice, develop their own staff, invest in their leadership and management capacity, and so on. So there's an automated system, and we recognise those businesses that have pledged, and we have an annual celebration. We've got 75 businesses so far. So that just gives you a flavour of some of the activity that's been happening over the past few years, which has resulted from the development of the framework. So in terms of the refresh for 2021, so we recognised that the document had kind of run out of track time in 2020, and actually it really did need a refresh because so much activity had happened. But we were cognisant of the impact of the pandemic on skills and employment. You know, so we've been tracking the impact on certain groups of individuals, the geography. You know, we've seen increases in universal credit claimants, particularly in our disadvantaged communities and for younger people. We've been tracking furlough, supporting furloughed individuals to develop their skills whilst they've not been working. So we were cognisant of the impact of the pandemic and not fully understanding, obviously, the full impact at present. And we've also got the development of the strategic economic framework. There's the development of the lists, the local industrial strategy, as well as the Greater Lancashire Plan with the independent economic review. So it felt not the right time to do a 5-year refresh. So it was agreed we'd do a 1-year refresh for 2021 and look to refresh that again in 2022. So the refresh is feeding into all of those strategies, but also in turn will respond to the outcomes and the priorities that have been identified in those. And we also wanted to align it with the statutory requirements of the DfE. So they have asked that we produce a local skills report every 2 years. So we've incorporated that into the refresh of the Skills and Employment Strategic Framework. So in terms of the process, so over the summer last year, we updated the evidence base, so all our labour market intelligence, looking at national government sets as well as local data, reviewed relevant government policy. So from, you know, since 2016, things like the careers strategy, digital, the industrial strategy, you know, a range of different documents have been published after the publication of the framework back in 2016. We identified a number of priorities and objectives building on the previous framework. So as I said, those 4 themes seem to hang well with our partners. It helps people to understand what it's all about and what our priorities are. So we've stuck with those 4 themes of future workforce, skilled, productive, inclusive and informed approach. And then in the autumn, we undertook a consultation. We used Zoom because obviously we couldn't get out and about talking to people. So we used Zoom for our consultations, and we had a couple of online events which involved breakouts and polls with over 50 employers, providers and stakeholders. I also met with the 15 councils, mainly chief executives, in some instances senior officers, met with each of the 4 university vice chancellors. And we also had a session with the LEP directors to kick around the priorities that we'd identified. So the final version was presented to the LEP board in December for final approval, and it was professionally published in January 2021. So the link's provided there for you to have a look at it, should you wish to as well. So I've just provided, this is just the summary page from the framework, just to show you how it's kind of constructed. So as you can see, an enabler of the LEP Strategic Economic Framework and the Greater Lancashire Plan as it evolves. We've got our LEP pillars of growth, so some key sectors. And then our 4 key themes, as I said previously, with the future workforce, focused on the work around careers provision, technical education. So we've got the launch of the new T-levels, which you may have come across, which are equivalent to A-levels, technical routes into employment, good quality, designed with employers and co-delivered, including an industrial placement. So we've got 4 colleges that started the delivery of T-levels in September and looking to roll those out. Our digital workforce of the future, mapping to the work that we're doing through the Digital Skills Partnership. So taking that digital is everywhere now. So absolutely, you know, in terms of our sectors, but also specific digital roles, supporting young people who are NEET to re-engage with learning and work. We have seen a significant impact from the pandemic on the aspirations of our young people. And so, you know, that's really important in terms of supporting them with transition at 16 and also 18. The skilled and productive workforce, as I say, apprenticeships linked to our technical education vision, reskilling and upskilling the current workforce with a particular focus on digital skills and technology adoption, leadership and management capacity in the SMEs and driving healthy workplaces. Under inclusive workforce, which will chime a lot with your community work in terms of supporting unemployed in an active into work, working with partners, sector-specific initiatives, as well as digital inclusion. And again, that's, you know, in terms of the impacts of the pandemic, it's not just about digital skills, it's also access to digital devices and data and being able to use those effectively to access public services, as well as boost their employability. And then embedding social value into commissioning, procurement and planning. So that's a one line, but there's a lot of activity behind there in terms of how we've embedded social value into the Growth Deal programme, into the projects that Anne-Marie just referenced in her previous presentation, and working across other schemes such as the City Deal. And then finally taking an informed approach to what we do, which includes kind of that evidence base, but also collaboration with stakeholders, other LEPs across the country and other mayoral combined authorities, so that we can learn and you know, learn from their good practice and adapt that for Lancashire, and working with government to evaluate what works. Okay, so I'll pause there. So I think we were quite keen just to kind of focus on the process of the refresh, but I'm aware that I've covered quite a lot of ground there.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm looking down the list and I don't seem to have any hands up at this moment, but I will just start with one question. Does the Rosebud programme fall under this particular?
No, that's it. It's with Andy Walker, who's on next, with the Boost programme as well. So that's aligned with that.
That's grand. And just one other thing, just a comment really. As again, I recognise the importance of being digitally literate, but I still see a slight failure to engage with rural enterprise in horticulture, agriculture, or arboriculture, to or just the practicalities of things that make our landscape tick. Just if you could take that back, I'd be grateful. Anyone else? I'm just going to go down the list again, and then we'll move on to Andy Walker. No, Andy, it's all yours. Thank you.
Sorry, I think you may have a question in the comments section. No. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't on. Yes, you do. Yeah. Zainab, do you want to ask that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, apologies, I don't have the hand function on my Zoom thing. It was just a comment, really. Just thank you for that presentation. It was really insightful, and thank you for really, raising the issue about youth unemployment and the amount of NEETs that we have. I know it's a real issue here in Blackburn with Darwen, and we have lots of young people that are unemployed, and it's a real challenge to provide support in terms of guiding them into employment. So it's a real important issue. So thank you for covering that.
All right, very welcome.
Andy, am I able to go ahead with the presentation?
If you load the presentation, Pritam, I'll just say a few words by way of introduction.
Cool.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to the item about Boost, Lancashire's Growth Hub. We'll take you through, Pritam will take you through the details specifically around how the Growth Hub has responded to the challenges of COVID. But just prior to that, if I could just say a few words about how Growth Hub operates. I think, as Sarah indicated in her presentation, we are one of the partner delivery structures. The business support team in Lancashire County Council has always been traditionally a strong and well-resourced area of work, having activities like Lancashire County Developments Limited with its business parks, and Rosebud, the loan fund we have run for the last 30 years. And so when the LEP looked to establish a growth hub some 7 or 8 years ago now, it was actually the county council that they turned to at that time to support that initiative. Pritam will tell you how the growth hub is organised and delivered within Lancashire, and how we've responded to the COVID pandemic and the pressures that that's put on Lancashire's business space. But just in terms of some general points, the growth hub in Lancashire is probably got somewhere in the region of 2.5 million turnover a year. The majority of that money, 60%, comes from the legacy European funds that we have, and that will run out to 2023, the middle of 2023. We still have that funding guaranteed. That funding is matched locally by a combination of monies from the county council and Lancashire County Development's surplus income. And we also receive somewhere in the region of £500,000 direct from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which is actually channeled through the LEP, and the use of those funds and the wider activity of the Growth Hub is reported through the Business Support Management Board, which was set out in Sarah's presentation as one of the subgroups feeding into the main LEP board. In terms of delivering business support, I guess people will remember potentially the Growth Hubs, the Business Link system, which existed alongside the development agencies. As that was disbanded, there was a hiatus, and really local enterprise partnerships started to take the initiative and establish a network of growth hubs themselves. This was then encouraged by national government, and we've now reached a position where each of the 38 LEP areas in England now has a growth hub structure running alongside of it. They're all configured slightly differently. They all draw their resources from slightly different areas, and they all deliver slightly different packages of work. But I think we're proud to say that Boost is highly regarded as part of that network and is seen to be a long, well-established and well-recognised service for the business community in Lancashire. I'll hand over to Pritam at that point, and he'll take you through the organisation of Boost.
Thanks, Andy. Andy's introduction in words on the screen, and I would just like to add one more thing to it, is just to remind everybody that Boost, Lancashire's Business Growth Hub, sits at the heart of the business support landscape within Lancashire. And Boost operates using a combination of direct help for businesses, as well as signposting to appropriate local and national sources of business support. And just again, a quick sum up of what Andy was saying previously earlier. So progress to date. So since 2013, Boost as a program, we've supported more than 8,000 businesses. We've created more than 3,500 jobs up to now, and added 100 million to the Lancashire economy. So our direct services include business relationship management, which is matching businesses to the right support at the right time. The Flying Start program provides support for new and young growing entrepreneurs, new businesses, and potential entrepreneurs. The Growth Mentoring program matches less experienced SMEs with experienced business mentors. And the Boost Bespoke program focuses on businesses with scale-up potential. And last but not the least, we have the Boost Marketing program, which provides an overarching umbrella of promoting different services, not just about Boost, but also services from 34 other business support agencies within Lancashire. Andy, sorry, did you say anything?
No, sorry, Pritam, I just got kicked out and I come back in.
Just a second. In 2020, we introduced a new initiative, which is the Peer Networks program. So Peer Networks is a national peer-to-peer networking program for SME leaders that want to grow and develop their organization for future success. It is delivered locally by Boost, which is Lancashire's Business Growth Hub, and is funded by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Interactive action learning is key to the Peer Networks program. There's a lot of things I can say about interactive action learning, but in a sense, it is where people are continually learning how to learn together. The offer also includes trained facilitators, small groups, flexible topic selection, and one-to-one coaching. This is about our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. John F. Kennedy once observed that the word crisis in Chinese is composed of two characters, one representing danger, the other one opportunity. He may not have entirely be correct on the linguistics, but I think the sentiment is true. Crisis presents a choice, and this is particularly true today. So COVID-19 pandemic, I think, surfaced a lot of unknown unknowns, and these are the problems, issues which we had not anticipated earlier or before. So a response was required. So there was a need to rapidly refocus the activities of the Growth Hub to the COVID-19 outbreak and the national lockdown. So we launched #AskForHelp campaign, which supported Lancashire business owners to the coronavirus pandemic. The campaign was rolled out within a week, launched on the first day of the UK's national lockdown in March, and has since helped more than 7,000 people by utilizing our helpline and online channels to manage the initial impact of coronavirus on their business operations. Much of Boost's funding is conditional and brings with it certain eligibility criteria regarding the types of businesses that can be supported. Therefore, a decision was taken early on in the pandemic that no business would be turned away, regardless of funding eligibility, with the intention that a reconciliation exercise would be carried out in the later part of the financial year in order to match businesses supported with the funding streams available. So initially, a significant effort was devoted to signposting businesses to national offers and support schemes announced by the government and the local support by the local authorities. This included support for businesses in understanding and interpreting the various offers and help in accessing the range of financial support that was put in place. Support with cash flow, accessing short-term capital, and help with supply chain formed the bulk of the work during this period. The following graph shows the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on demand for growth of services. I would just like to mention one thing. This graph is kind of relates to our relationship management service. So if it's not, it doesn't include the other services that I mentioned, like the growth mentoring service, the pressure on the bespoke service, the startup program. So they've had increased inquiries during the COVID-19 crisis period. So in the period July to September, with many Lancashire businesses more looking towards recovery, Boost launched its hashtag Boost Your Recovery initiative. The campaign was made available to all Lancashire businesses to help them understand the key challenges and opportunities in the current situation and develop a strategy for bouncing back. The support included webinars, video content, online coaching, peer learning, tips, other tools, and advice focused on key aspects of recovery from coronavirus. A new recovery hub was launched on the Boost website, supported by Boost's helpline for advice. The tiered restrictions from September 2020 and then the second national lockdown in December brought about renewed urgency to support those businesses most acutely affected. A new grant regime was introduced, offering financial support for businesses to adapt and reposition themselves to a post-pandemic environment, and this has helped 341 local businesses to date. And to provide additional support to businesses, in late 2020, we introduced the new resilience program to help business managers to deal with challenges they are facing. Resilience Networks offers Lancashire businesses, business owners and managers of a range of different support options delivered by some of Lancashire's more renowned private sector providers. They all focus on building resilience and include sales coaching, finance advice, and mental well-being support for male leaders. The program is fully funded by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and private sector partners includes Forbes solicitors, finance experts. And as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The latest Growth Hub Satisfaction Survey results show 94% Lancashire businesses are satisfied with the support provided by Boost, and 96% businesses are likely to recommend the service to a friend. And how does Boost work? How does the program work? I think I'm just going to let one of our business directors say how it works rather than just talking about a process. Hopefully this YouTube video link will work.
Try. Give another go, Pritam, see if it'll...
You can't normally interact with the slides on screen share.
Right, just let me try. I'll give it another go. Just give me a second. Any luck? Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've got sound there.
Yeah.
No sound.
Oh.
Is there no sound?
No. No sound.
Okay. Let me just give it a second. If I stop this technology,
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it's going to
work.
work.
That's fine.
Sorry, Pritam.
No, that's absolutely fine. This is what technology is about. So how does Boost work? I think the simplest way is it's just for people to call us on the 0800 488 0057 number, and at the end of the phone, there's going to be a brilliant business relationship manager or a business advisor who is definitely bound to delight you. So all you have to do is kind of pick up the phone and dial 0800 488 0057 and get delighted. So, and there are a couple of case studies here as well. So hopefully that should work. So I guess that's about Boost and our response to the COVID-19 crisis. Any questions from anyone? But let me just stop sharing now.
Don't see any. I don't see any. Can I just clarify on page 61 of our notes where it says they all focus on building resilience, etc., support for male leaders. Is that specifically one-sided?
Yes, I mean that I think it was it came up from, I think it is one-sided. Let me be honest, and I'll answer you with a straight bad. And I think just a focus on male leaders and their mental health issues.
Oh, there's not much more I can say to that, really. I thought we were all in it together. Right. I don't think there's anyone else. I don't think anyone else has a question. So thank you very much. That was that was great. I think it's given us all a good insight.
Thank you.
And we've got a lot to think about. Basically, for some of us, all of this or part of it will be new. That really concludes the business of the meeting, really. So all we're looking at is, unless anyone, Sarah, do you have anything else to add?
Thank you. I was just going to say, thank you very much for your time and attention today. And we'd really appreciate your feedback because we'd really like this to be an interactive session with you. So, your feedback on what's the best way to do it. Is it we share more material before the session, less material? we don't go as deep, we go broader, or we go deeper, we do less topics. Yeah, whatever your feedback is, you know, we've really valued that, and then we'll try and adapt accordingly for the next scrutiny committee. But want to do this in a way that, you know, you feel able to ask questions and challenges, and, you know, give feedback. It's really important to us through this process.
Can I also just put out to members that we are still looking for an independent chairman, and if people have anyone to put forward, perhaps they could get in touch with Sarah, and we can forward things there. I think there's only been 2 to date put forward. Yes, so it's still open. Any members before we just finish with? I don't think we really can put a date, other than saying that September, I think, was the proposed month. We don't really have a date. No one? Thank you. Well, can I just say thank you very much to all the officers and to everyone who may have been watching this webcast. Thank you very much for all attendees, and I'm sure you will put in any further questions to Sarah directly following this session. So goodbye and thank you very much.